So a lot has happened since we talked last. Berke, McFall. Speaking of falls, the Pac-12's done. What's going on? We're talking about all that and more on this edition of Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. So like, comment, and subscribe. You need to become an everyday listener, an everydayer, as we quote-unquote call it here at Locked On, because man, oh man, it just seems like every day there's something happening, especially for UCLA. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn because every potential new hire feels like a high-stakes wager for your small business. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find those right people faster and for free. Post your job at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Well, there's no terms and conditions to the signing, though, of Berke Buyuktuncel, if I can say that name correctly, because he's officially a Bruin. It happened over the weekend. Couldn't put up any breaking news content. I'm moving all around and everywhere in between during this busy time of life, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about it to start this Monday episode, because finally, the 7-man class has finally been completed for Mick Cronin. Yes, you've got 7 freshmen. You got a transfer. You got quite a few sophomores, not too many returners, and all those veteran guys who have left and gone on to the pros, to the NBA, graduated, everything in between. It's a whole new roster. Technically, the Bruins have another scholarship spot available, but they're only looking, from all the reports, to really fill up to the 12 spots that they completed now. 7 freshmen. Tell me how crazy this next season will be, because you mix in the 7 freshmen. You've got the 4 international recruits, which have come slowly but surely. Ilan Fible, Jan Vide, Adai Mara over the most recent week. And then you've got the likes of Berke Buyuktuncel. I posted an episode closer to the 4th of July holiday in which we talked about how all the signs were pointing to Berke coming. And then everything was really just a waiting game. Mick Cronin said, all right around the end of July, right before the beginning of August, that we're expecting the 2 newcomers to sign officially, in addition to the coaching changes and coaching promotions with the expanded men's basketball, women's basketball coaching staffs. And nothing really changed from what we've expected this last month. For Mara, we've been expecting that for maybe 4 months now. For Buyuktuncel, he's somebody that's really been revealed only over the last year, or not the last year, but over the last month and a half maybe, where he's a 6'9" freshman from Turkey. Recently, he was very good in the FIBA U19 World Cup during the summer, named to the All-Star 5, shot 86% from the free throw line, close to 35% from 3. He's been very instrumental in helping his Turkish team play internationally. He left his team in Turkey a lot easier than Mara had to deal with his team. And the Bruins now have 7 spectacular freshmen, we hope, in one way or another, whether it's this year, 23 to 24, or years to come when the Bruins move to the Big Ten with some new friends. We'll touch on that, old friends. And speaking of new friends, he's going to have Mara, who's expected potentially to be a lottery pick. You've got Vide, who everybody's high on with his international development. You've got Fible, who's got NBA-level skills, good defensive skills, can hit some shots. Mara, 7'3" Spaniard. I think that speaks for himself. Brandon Williams, Devin Williams, and Sebastian Mack. Guys who we all have to see how these freshmen gel with the likes of a Dylan Andrews, who's expected to be that starting guard. You've got McClendon, who wants to earn some minutes, still slowly recovering from the knee injury. And you've got Lazar Stefanovic, someone who transferred from Utah, another international recruit who we've talked about back when Samovic was key in getting these international recruits and the transfers in. As the Bruins brought in Stefanovic, he's going to be wanting a starting 3 or 4 spot. Adem Bona speaks for himself. Kenneth Nuba, you can't forget about the long tenured Bruin who's been there now for his 6th year, using that COVID season, and then everything in between. This will just be a crazy, or maybe I've forgotten a name. There's been so many new names I could forget. And now everybody's building this hype train, which you maybe seen articles. I believe Gojo Bruin talked about it. I talked about it about a month ago, 3 weeks ago, how this class of 23 can very easily be the highest ranked class in the class of 23 across the country. There's been different rankings. I've touched on it between the On3s, the 24/7 Sports, and the Rivals. You can go to ESPN2. The Bruins are amongst the top 15, maybe top 10, depending on what you have it. They don't really have the best ratings available for Mara, for Vide, for Fible, for Buyuktuncel, as the UCLA pronunciation guy gives it, if I'm even pronouncing it right. But then you've got different sites like The Ringer, who posts an article before Mara Buyuktuncel committed officially to UCLA. This happened in early August, a couple weeks ago, or not a couple weeks ago, a couple days before both their commitments. And when you look at next year's first-round NBA draft, you've got Bona, who should be a first-rounder if he recovers nicely and has another spectacular sophomore season. Mara, who's flirted with the idea that he's a lottery pick, and Berke, who's someone as the last recruit might be forgotten. He could easily be an NBA first-rounder, what they're looking at. We've talked about Vide being a second-round NBA draft pick. The Bruins could easily get 3 first-rounders a year after they were a team that tied the NCAA lead for most draft picks in a single draft, and the Bruins are sitting here with 2 of 3 picks potentially being freshmen as guys who go in the first round if they're one and dones. We hope that UCLA doesn't have to fill 7 spots next year. I don't think they will. I'm not sure how the domestic high school recruits will develop or how these international guys will develop. Mick Cronin, when he talked in his interview with Petros and Money a few weeks ago, he mentioned how we need guys that can be that flashy talent, that guy that can develop like a Jaime Jaquez Jr. And while we're excited about the talent, the versatility, what Buyuktuncel can bring as a defensive stopper, Mick Cronin talks about internationally a highly regarded international product. He has developed an identity as a defensive stopper, someone who can pick and pop from 3, according to The Ringer, and can easily drive the basketball as a southpaw. There's so many things that this Bruins team can do that somebody's not going to get playing time. More players will play some more minutes, and you just wonder how this defense is going to look, because the Bruins had one of the most efficient defenses if you go by all the matrices and you do different indexes, all the different things you can look up, all the formulas, everything you look up, net ratings. And the Bruins were one of arguably the best defensive team in the country because they have the best defensive player in the country, along with even better good defense around him, and an efficient offense because of some good defense and some senior leadership. You've got youth, a team who I'm not quite sure where the ball is going to go, who's going to have it, who's going to shoot it. Is it going to be an unselfish roster? Is it a team that truly has to develop? Is Buyuktuncel going to be to Spain? I haven't read too much about that just yet. Mara was unlikely from what I read from Ben Bolch. And then Bona is not healthy enough to go to that Spain exhibition trip. So we hope that some of these minutes and some of these players can develop some chemistry with one another before the season starts, which is just about 3 months' time from the recording and posting of this podcast. And the sky's the limit for this team. I don't want to put unfair expectations in terms of national championship hopes now that we know officially what the coaching staff looks like, who is replacing Samovic in international recruiting for years to come. We have the team. I can't just say they're an international. They're going to be a national championship contender. They're the 2 or 3 team, 5 team shortlist. They're a team that will be very good and exciting. We should be hyped as Bruins fans overall. 8 clapping days on end until November comes with some tough and exciting games off the mainland, on the East Coast to build, especially in the final year of the Pac-12, potentially as a conference. But still, you have to be wary. I think there will be some struggle parts. Mick Cronin even already alluded to it. He might lose a little bit more sleep this year because it's a little different playing in true road games, regardless of the atmosphere, with new players, playing in new countries, playing in new atmospheres, even the freshmen, even the sophomores. Most of these players will be playing in vastly different roles than they're used to, with Mick Cronin trying to coach them up a lot differently than a senior Pac-12 Player of the Year, Jaime Jaquez Jr., a 5th year but 4-year playing Tiger Campbell, right? Singleton, who is connecting on just about nearly half his threes for almost the whole season from extremely deep range. A team that I think will play some good defense, can rebound the basketball well, arguably has better shooting from various sources, the Bruins really relied on Singleton as a three-point shooting threat. I think this team, while the numbers might not show it, has more players that can shoot the ball at a better clip than the Bruins had last year, right? Hawkins was close to a 30%er. Campbell, if he was shooting well, 30. We know Singleton and all that. Bailey had good numbers, but he didn't shoot it all that often. The Bruins might shoot more from deep, and they might connect a little more. I just wonder how this is all going to play out offensively and how much the sophomores have developed. There's just so many things that we can get excited and talked about. Berke's here. He could be a potential first rounder. There's just so many things. And there's so many things to get to that we're going to talk about this from here on until November. 7 new guys. They all got signed. 4 international recruits after you had to replace multiple guys leaving to go pro or play in the NBA draft, and Singleton graduating. So many things. We talked about all those missed recruits, and yet here we are in the later stages of 2023, and it's still one of the most exclusive clubs in terms of the recruiting class, I should say, in talented 2023 classes overall. We won't know how it looks, but we'll find out more as the games come to play soon enough. What will the Pac-12 look like? I think it's gone. We'll talk about all that and more because we haven't touched on it since all that crazy news has broken over the weekend. But we'll get to that in just a moment. In the meantime, we'll tell you more about LinkedIn because, I think some of these people in the Pac-12 might be asking for a new home. But if you're a small business owner, I don't know, is the Pac-12 a small business owner at this stage of the game? I don't know. Pac-12, who knows? But back to LinkedIn Jobs, every potential new hire feels like a high-stakes wager for your small business. Go to LinkedIn Jobs because they help you find the right people for your job faster and for free. Screening questions makes you find the candidates you want to hire and interview even faster. And all you have to do is post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Segment 2 of the Locked On UCLA podcast, a long rant, a long ramble about who UCLA brought in, what they might look like, and everything in between. But Berke Buyuktuncel is officially a Bruin. The 7-man class is complete, and the mountain Mick Cronin had to climb in the offseason has officially now gone to the other side. It's the slope, and now you build towards the season. But he's soon going to be building for the Big Ten, as UCLA football will be. They're in fall camp. There's been all the talks about Dante Moore, Garber, Schlee, even Martin thrown in there, and there's 4-man quarterback battle. But we're going to look to the future because we've been talking about this. It's now less than a year until UCLA heads into the Big Ten Conference. And for a while, it looked like UCLA and SC, these big bad dogs, who really kicked around alongside with Texas and Oklahoma, this idea that, well, we're going to get some money. They're a little greedy. They needed to do this, especially for UCLA, because they needed the money to deal with some financial shortfalls, the deficit, the bad Under Armour deal, everything in between. And then all of a sudden, a whirlwind happened. Colorado said, we're not liking how this Pac-12 media rights deal is not coming up with George Kliavkoff. Why is it this rumor of streaming? Why are they the last to the table, the real major conferences, of getting all these time slots and the media rights deals and all the different conferences? So Colorado bolts to the Big 12, almost out of nowhere, right? All the hype of Deion Sanders, but they go back to the Big 12 where they came from heading into the Pac-12, and they were kind of cellar dwellers in the Pac-12. You can make all those jokes, but that was the case. But that led other teams to be like, wait a minute, let's think about this, because now the Pac-12 still doesn't have an option to do things, and all of a sudden, Oregon, Stanford, Cal, and Washington were all having their names thrown around as Big Ten expansion possibilities. If you remember, the Big Ten had said with their commission, the new commissioner, right, that they weren't even looking to add new members. UCLA and I think SC were both pretty much on/off the record, not wanting the West Coast teams to join the Big Ten. They wanted this money all the Big Ten West Coast exposure, hit the Midwest with recruiting, and get $75 million a year and then some to go make more money, go do this, and get to a new conference while leaving their former rivals and foes in the dust. Only for Oregon and Washington to jump on the train at a limited revenue share, much less than what UCLA and SC will be getting, but more money that they would have gotten in the Pac-12 in the streaming subscribers deal based on all the different reporters and beat reporters and the people breaking this story about the collapse and the death of the Pac-12. Not official, but the unofficial death of the Pac-12 to join UCLA and SC, which helps the Bruins because they'll have a couple more West Coast foes to play, right? Oregon, Autzen Stadium's a good environment. Washington, Seattle's still a fun place to go, Husky Stadium. Keeping them some Western, coast foes, so they won't have to travel as far as opposed to Nebraska being their closest team or one of the closest teams that they play in the Big Ten. But it still is not what they wanted, right? They didn't want these West Coast teams. And we can't forget Arizona State, Utah, all thinking, hey, we've got to do something. And they all jumped to the Big 12 with Colorado, which left Oregon State, which left Washington State, Cal, and Stanford out to dry as a quote-unquote 4-team Pac-12. The conference is champions, as our dear beloved Bill Walton always likes to say. The conference of champions is not going to be anymore after over a century plus of memories, moments, championships, and it's basically gone. The one thing UCLA now has to look forward to after all this craziness, they just released the Big Ten football schedule for the next 2 years. Oregon and Washington, as well as the other Pac-12 departing members, are all joining next year in 2024. The Big Ten schools, UCLA, SC, Oregon, and Washington, will be joining on August 2nd, 2024. I've been talking about all these articles UCLA's been doing, even SC, about all the things, the time, the effort, the money, the financials they've been pouring into a year plus just to build for a 2-year preparation period to get into the Big Ten, which is why it might be dangerous and a bad move for Oregon and Washington to do it, other than the financial reasons, just to stay alive. I'm not sure what the infrastructure is going to look like, having less than a year to prepare, going to a complete different conference all the way across the country with almost, tougher, crazier, rigorous travel schedules than what UCLA and SC might have. And we go to that Big Ten football schedule, the Flex Protect Plus that they had, all those fun games that UCLA had, those are going to get thrown out the window. 24, 25, when it looked like 2024 might not be too good for UCLA's football schedule. 2025 is a bit easier, but they had a lot of fun games coming in 2024. People might have already started booking flights, even though they didn't release any games. They might have had this idea, all right, we're going to go to Columbus, or, we're going to go to Ann Arbor. We're going to go here, Nebraska, or somebody's going to come here. And now they're going to have to redo the schedule after they said, we're not expanding. Here's the Big Ten schedule. Now that's going to have to get reworked. And probably, what if they go to a regional mini scheduling model while still allowing for the rotation of games that UCLA and SC and the rest of the Big Ten schools will get, going to a 16 to 18 team conference, which just seems absurd in the uber super conference era. Other than that, you've got a conference that's dead, the Pac-12, which could have been the Pac-16 way back when Utah and Colorado were added, when they could have had the Texas and the Oklahomas, right? When they were shopping themselves way back when, or even more than that, when they could have been the original super conference when they were expanding to 16, 17, 18 teams. And then now Pac-12's dead. All these West Coast rivalries will either be non-conference rivalries, or the Big Ten might just be the Big Ten West, which is the Pac-12, half of it. And then you've got the Big Ten Midwest, which is the rest of the Big Ten, and the Big Ten East, which is all those newer schools. The greed, we've seen coaches, I think Jake Dickard from Washington State, I believe the Mizzou head coach, I didn't see his name. They've all been on the record, I think, putting in good quotes about how the greed and the TV money, and everybody could either throw their opinions, their thoughts, and words on social media. And it is sad to see about how we've let all the money kind of ruin the nostalgia of it, the real practicality of it, of the traveling, the student athlete. And I know NIL is a part of it. The players can make some money off of it while they don't get directly paid to play, as Chip Kelly will always point out about how the involvement of the institutions is when it comes to bringing in players and how they get paid. The important thing to remember is, while it will be interesting, different, and maybe we got to keep an open mind for sure, Losing what? What did we lose? And what is the cost? What are the pros and what are the cons? I've always been told this, the pros and cons list. There's some pros. A lot of it has to do with some dollar signs from different decision makers, different powerful figures. Gene Block just retired from UCLA. He was important in allowing UCLA to go to the Big Ten. Martin Germain, the newer athletic director, one of the newer athletic directors, he helped make these moves. And they thought about it, but now all these other schools rushing into these decisions, it'll be interesting life moving forward to be a big-time Power 5, Power 4 super conference as we wait to see what it looks like when UCLA has to go recruit for these teams when their closest rival other than SC is in Oregon and then Nebraska and Washington. It will be a fun time when you get to go to all the cool, fun new atmospheres, which will now be maybe not on the schedule when they redo it for the Big Ten for the next couple of years with Oregon and Washington coming in. Let's keep an open eye and see what's the consequences, what are the pluses, what are the negatives when we think about this in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. What's going to happen in 2033? All this with the expanded playoff could have negated the need to jump and go to a new conference. All of that could have been just completely, hey, we got 12 teams. We could still have the 5 conferences or a 6-conference thing, divide and conquer. And now we're just combining into less and less conferences. What I'm going to leave you is, I think what Ben Bolch talked about Chip Kelly, one recent quote near end of fall camp and what was a little quip. And he said, hey, one super 60-team conference? And then you split it based off regions, which may be where we're going to head when we realize this is a little ridiculous. Maybe we just go to a divisional model where we go back to regions and then we just have time slots. And then we get the fun games in certain times. And then the teams play together to see who is a national champion. That's what Chip Kelly had. An idea, right? Where they just go back to more regional format, a super conference and divisions, if you will. That's not exactly his full quote. I don't really want to take him out of context there, but maybe they head back. Maybe they've swung so far that we swing back in 10 to 20 years' time. Or maybe we just go so crazy that eventually teams can't keep up and we just have less schools with big-time teams that can compete. In the end, it'll be fun, it'll be frustrating, it'll be awesome, and it'll suck all at the same time. All those emotions will be entertaining. And this middle segment rant, I think, is over. But with all the new moves, Oregon and Washington, the Big Ten, Utah, ASU, Arizona, Colorado, the Big 12, Pac-12, basically obliterated, maybe more than a matter of time before Cal and Stanford find new homes. Washington State, Oregon State, probably in the same boat. And what happens? Does the Pac-12 become Mountain West plus? I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. I don't have that information at the top of my head. I'm not that smart. I can't brainstorm. What do we think of George Kliavkoff, who was put in a terrible situation getting it for Larry Scott? I don't know. Those are all interesting. It helps the Bruins out travel-wise for sure. Getting a couple more West Coast rivals, although they're not right up the coast. They're still a decent flight away, but much closer than the rest of the Big Ten. Maybe takes away from that advantage of West Coast recruiting that they're hoping for. But still, they'll have to redo those schedules, and we'll see what it looks like moving forward. Football, though, we are all excited because they did get a recruit, something that slipped under the cracks because we took a day off and then the whole world just completely crumbled in the Pac-12. Berke came a Bruin, and there was actually a commit for UCLA, 4-star, I believe, out of Texas. And we're going to talk about him, Derek McFall, when we come back on Locked On UCLA. Welcome back. Final segment of the Locked On UCLA podcast. We've had multiple rants. UCLA basketball, the Pac-12. This episode probably might not end if I didn't have to, because we need the episodes to be within that 20 to 30-minute range, right? Don't want to have too much of a rant. Well, these are things we're going to talk about for days, years, months, hours, so many things to come in the future that we just don't have the answers to right now. But we do have the answer to who is the latest UCLA commit. It's Derek McFall, a 4-star athlete out of the state of Texas. We talked about UCLA's expanded recruiting reach. And while the Big 12 kind of has a stranglehold on Texas, right? Even all the Texas schools, Colorado trying to dive in there with Deion Sanders going back in the future when they move to the Big 12. But the Bruins get a 4-star athlete, a 5'10", 175-pound prospect who's rated as the number 25 athlete in Texas, top 50 prospect in the state of Texas if you look at the 24/7 sports rankings, and said he developed a good bond with Coach Neuheisel as a possible receiver, has a great bond with Chip Kelly, and he played with the California Power, those 7-on-7 teams and 7-on-7 programs. So it was interesting for that. But overall, what he said, quote, was, they said they wanted to use me like a DeAnthony Thomas. I'll play more in the slot and play some running back. And what's interesting is right now in high school, he's playing quarterback. So he's playing quarterback before he'll become a UCLA Bruin. As it says, this class of 2024 product becomes the biggest and best, latest recruits, maybe not the biggest and best, but overall, he's a guy that UCLA wants to become an important piece in the future. Someone who, if they're saying DeAnthony Thomas-esque is important, we'll see how that all plays out, as this is a 4-star product. He has yet to visit UCLA. He still's got some visits to go. He committed and says his recruiting still mildly open, but he's going to go on some visits. He'll visit UCLA officially in October when the Bruins host Washington State, one of the 4 remaining Pac-12 schools, and said how who would ever thought, coming from where I come from, I'd have the opportunity to play at a high level, to play at a big-time program. And the biggest thing that he said was, in his reason to commit, was Jerry Neuheisel, his relationship with Jerry Neuheisel, who the Bruins offered in McFall back on July 14th. So they got someone who can do a lot. Maybe he adds to the quarterback's room, but he is someone who could do a lot, be a big, potentially bruising back, be a potentially bigger running back than, maybe more running backs across the country, and someone who could really add to this 2024 class and be those Swiss Army knives, which is the word that some might use, where the Bruins can use him in a variety of roles. I don't know a lot about him very much at this moment in terms of, this is the latest guy. He can come be an impact guy. Chip Kelly goes after certain guys, and with him being a 4-star, a sneaky get out of Texas, UCLA doesn't always venture that far in to get guys from Texas. They're barely right now plucking out of the Midwest. A couple of flips they've gotten recently in the Midwest, but going to Texas, showcasing, hey, this is what this Big Ten life might have, especially now adding Washington and Oregon. And it's great to see that someone who hasn't even, quote unquote, visited UCLA yet can still come to UCLA. The biggest thing that's most important, though, is that, hey, he's still got a couple of visits. It's a commit. He could easily flip. Remember, UCLA's top 2023 recruit, Roderick Robinson, flipped late in the game to Georgia. I wonder if this is the guy, being from Texas, might go to a Texas school later, considering he still has some visits, quote unquote, more than one visits to go on, hasn't been to Westwood. Maybe he changes his mind. And that's how any of these recruits, any of these verbal commits can be, right? Before they officially sign. Even if you do sign, you could still change your mind and transfer after it's all said and done. But here we are, and UCLA has a good one. Someone who can do multiple things in McFall. And I look forward to UCLA using his talents in a lot of ways. Chip Kelly's a great mind to find ways to do that. And now they continue to grow their class. They get more offensive weapons. They're very O-line, defensive heavy. Couple of secondary gets recently with Jameer Benjamin. They just flipped, right? Getting him from, quote unquote, Stanford and Northwestern before he came to UCLA, his third commitment, his recruiting class very recently. And now they're slowly picking up offensively a couple of pieces that they want. But remember, Ethan O'Connor, a Los Alamitos 3-star athlete, he eventually was the only Bruin who committed that did not sign with UCLA on signing day. So we'll see how this plays out with someone from Texas. Will he sign? Will he find a better offer? Will he play a position that he wants to at a better spot in a different school? We'll see how that all plays out. But for now, the Bruins building that class and going after more offensive threats for now as the Bruins build their 2024 class. All that and more we'll discuss in deep discussion. Who's going to win the quarterbacking job? Because, hey, Dante Moore has some cool swag, doesn't even use social media. You've got Garbers, who's looking the veteran presence, the loud guy wanting to win that job as he's running out of college eligibility. There's so many cool things to talk about with fall camp the UCLA Fearsome 7, Super 7, whatever you're going to talk about. Basketball team's exciting. That's why you become an everyday listener of the Locked On UCLA podcast. Everydayers got to tune in, listen, and thanks for the support. Hit that subscribe button. I thank you very much. I'm Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer signing off, but Bruins fans, 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, UCLA. UCLA fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Go Bruins.